Warning: the material discussed in this show may be sensitive or a trigger for some listeners. Strong language and topics are discussed. We talk with active duty service members and practice OPSEC at all times. You have been warned.
The Bipolar DM, Jason Cottam. His show talks about Dungeons and Dragons, indie writing, and living with a mental illness, in particular bipolar disorder, borderline disorder, and major depression, among other diagnoses. Check us out right here on Saturdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, also on WLFE-DB.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. So take a seat, sit back, and get ready for the Bipolar DM.
Welcome to the Bipolar DM Show. I am your host, Jason. Thank you for tuning in. This is a show about Dungeons and Dragons, indie writing, and living with the mental illness, in particular bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, and major depression, among other diagnoses. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, you can reach us by email at thebipolardm@gmail.com or visit my webpage, thebipolardm.com. There you'll find previous episodes of my podcast, links to my live shows, as well as resources on indie writing, mental health, and Dungeons and Dragons. We have a Facebook group too, which is at Bipolar DM, and that is also where we have updates on the show. It's a little bit more up to date than the webpage because I'm able to use it from my phone and tablet and put articles, videos, and other content on the show on the Facebook page. Now, right at the moment in news, I am locked out of my Facebook account. I have no idea why. It's not from a violation or anything like that. But I've not been able to update anything for the past week. I'm still locked out, so hopefully we can get this resolved with Facebook. Unfortunately, there's no way to contact them, so it's just a big mess. But hopefully things will unstuck itself and we'll get back on track again. Be sure to check out not only my show, but other shows that we have on WLFE-DB Radio. If you go to WLFE-DB Radio Network on Facebook, you can find links to our other shows, such as Across the Pond, Inside the Drag Closet, Just Cindy, Meet the Author, Step into the Paranormal, and other shows that we have. You can find those on there, as well as going to WLFE-DB.com. There they'll have listings of all our shows and times as well. And we are on also Stream TV. So if you are using a Roku or something similar to that, you can go to Stream TV and find us under the Variety Unlimited channel. And we're also on twitch.tv/the Bipolar DM. The Bipolar DM Show is a proud sponsor of Safe Space. This is a virtual safe space, so if you are in crisis or having problems going on right now, you can reach out to us. If you go to WLFE-DB.com and click on the Safe Space logo, it will give you more information as well as resources that you can use to help you through whatever you're going through. Now, we're not doctors and we're not psychiatrists and we're not going to try and solve your problems, but what we are here is to listen without judgment. And so if you have nobody else to reach out to, you can reach out to us. Not only are we a supportive safe space, but we also have a Patreon going on. So if you like what we're doing with this show and the content that we have on, be sure to think about donating to Patreon and becoming a Patreon supporter. We have various levels available from the entry level on up. Different goodies available there. Just go to patreon.com/Bipolar DM for more information. In today's show, we are going to have Craig on. He is a professional dungeon master who also does corporate team building with Dungeons and Dragons. So it's a very interesting conversation we're going to have. So let's go ahead and bring him on board. And hello. How are you doing?
Oh, absolutely fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on, Jason.
Well, let's go ahead and just kind of get started with just a kind of a background on you. We're going to talk a little bit about Dungeons and Dragons. When did you start playing Dungeons and Dragons?
Dungeons and Dragons as a rule set, like as a system specifically, I started with the video game Neverwinter Nights, which was based on 3rd edition D&D. But RPGs and storytelling more broadly, I grew up with that. My dad was a huge fan of tabletop games and RPGs, so they've been a part of my life for as long as I can remember.
Amazing. What system did you cut your teeth under? Was it 3.0, or was it one of the newer systems, or was it an older system?
3.5 was the very first system that I started DMing with D&D.
Okay. And did you kind of just jump into DMing, or were you a player first?
I would have, I think, much like many DMs, loved to have been a player first. But
yeah,
it didn't work out that way. I had a bunch of friends who wanted to play, and I had a bit of money, enough to pick up the DM's guide. And so I figured if nobody else is going to DM, I'm going to do it. So I started DMing. And I only started playing, I think, 3 or 4 years after DMing. I mean, I had played in 3rd edition, but 3.5, the edition that I cut my teeth on, that was all DMing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of the thing about us is some of us DMs are forever DMs in the game. It's just kind of a trick. I don't know if it's a trap we fall into, or just the way the cards play out, or how we're wired. But I guess certain of us just are always a DM, a dungeon master running the game versus being a player, and so that's pretty good. Now, what system do you like now? Are you a fan of the 5th edition, or is there another system that you prefer above that?
5th edition is definitely my favorite. Out of all the systems that are out there, is D&D specifically, 5th edition is my favorite far and away. It's so easy to teach in comparison to other systems, and I found that just trying to introduce people to 3rd edition, 3.5, it was such a nightmare. But introducing people to 5th edition is easy, right? Especially with D&D Beyond and everything like that. It's very simple to get characters made up.
Yeah, so what kind of what features do you like about the 5th edition that makes it so playable for the inexperienced player?
It is both a blessing and a curse that 5th edition is a very modular system, in that the core rule system itself is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. There's not a lot going on in terms of crazy, unique rules, but it does really easily bolt on other mechanics. So it's very, very simple for me to explain proficiency and skills and feats and dice rolls and skill checks and attacks and stuff like that. Like I can teach 5th edition in 15 to 30 minutes, right? Of course, that's the mechanics, not all the minutia. But it's very simple. I really like the proficiency system. I think they really knocked it out of the park with bounded accuracy on that one.
Yeah. So when one day a 6th edition is going to come out. And when that happens, what do you think should be probably the biggest improvement that they should make on 5th edition if they're building upon that?
One thing that has always bothered me is that a lot of classes in 5th edition have got really cool, unique role-playing story abilities that lend themselves really well to different types of adventures and content other than just dungeon crawling. But not every class does. And it's weird because 5th edition ostensibly wants to be a lot more of a role-playing game than a war game. But every class is designed with combat mechanics. And only a handful of classes, and often then it's really only a handful of subclasses, get role-playing mechanics. So I'd love to see more of those.
Yeah, that would be awesome too. I mean, that's kind of a question I've been asking everybody, and a lot of people have been stumped on it. Kind of thinking, what can we improve upon? I always think there's room for improvement, with 5th edition. I like how the combat system works, although I wish they could tighten it up just a little bit, is what I would like. Especially for like the fighter classes that don't have magic, don't have spells and stuff like that. It'd be nice that they tighten it up a little bit more, so that if you want to play a straight fighter, you're not getting left behind, especially when there's a bard in there who can do just about everything, and and other classes like that. So
yeah, fighters might get those extra attacks and extra ASIs, but I just don't think they're comparable in a lot of ways to other classes like paladins or barbarians or bards or whatever.
Exactly. So when did you decide to go pro?
It wasn't really a decision that I made consciously. It was more a case of I had more friends that wanted to play D&D than I could run D&D for. So it was about 4 years ago now that I sat down and I said, well, I can run more D&D, but I'm going to have to take a day or two off of work each week to account for that. So you're going to need to pay me. And people said, okay. And I was honestly quite shocked by that. I did not expect people to answer, all right, I'll pay you money to run D&D. And that is where it started. That was 4 years ago. Oh my gosh, almost to the day. It was 4 years ago in September. So it was only a couple of weeks ago, I think, that I started running D&D professionally.
Okay, so how you have all these friends coming in, asking to play, and they're willing to pay. How did you set this up?
Well, I'd set it up originally through Facebook as what's called a West Marches campaign, which is basically a campaign that's driven by players. So the players get to decide what adventure hooks they want to pursue. The players get to decide what day the adventures are going to be, what characters they're going to bring, and all those sorts of things. And that solves a lot of the problems that many DMs have with D&D, scheduling, which is, for most people an absolute nightmare. But when the players are responsible for scheduling, it takes a lot of the onus and the burden off of you. I'll admit fully that I had no problem scheduling a bunch of games anyways. And usually what I would do is I would just say, hey, we're playing on this day. You can sign up for the event. And if you can't make it, that sucks. If you can, awesome. We had about 18 players, I think, to begin with, 18 to 20 players. So usually if I put an event down, 6 to 8 people or whatever would sign up. I capped it at 6 originally. I made the mistake of going up to 8 players. I know DMs online who say they run for like 10 to 12 players. That's crazy. But
I don't know how they do it. They're a beast.
Yeah. Well, I have one campaign that I run that's 8 players. And the issue that I find with it is not that things are too slow. It's just that there's too many people to split the attention between, so everybody gets less attention, and everybody's character matters just a little bit less to the story because there's 8 of them. Right.
Yeah, you lose somebody. Oh, well, we got another 7 to replace them, and stuff like that. And I could see, in old school D&D, when you do a classic dungeon crawl, which is like a hack and slash, you don't really have to worry so much about that character development. But in this newer edition, when you're role playing and you want to have your character progress, emotionally and spiritually and all that, yeah, you do want to have more of that time, during your turn to do that.
Yeah. Even taking into account older editions and dungeon crawls and stuff like that, though, DMing for any more than 4 to 5 players is a wild journey. I had a DM that just started off with Tyranny of Dragons, for example, and it's one of the published campaign paths with 5th edition. It has such a deadly opening act. It is notorious for TPKing parties and for killing unprepared parties if DMs don't bother to read things in advance, because they just throw so many enemies at you. I think by the time the first act of Tyranny of Dragons is done, if you've gone through every single encounter, which is unlikely, but if you have gone through every single encounter, you fought something like 50 to 60 different enemies at level 1, which is even for a party of 6, which is higher than what D&D recommends, that is a lot of enemies.
Yeah, well, we have a question from Chanel, and she's asking, is that 100 Acre Wood behind you, Craig?
It sure is, yes, absolutely. My dad's name is Christopher, named after Christopher Robin. So.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool. All right, so now we got your start now, and how we got it going. Let's see. How about there was a big question, why? I mean, you obviously, you have a lot of people who want to play, and you want to provide that for them. But ultimately, what it comes down to, why quit your job and do this? Why become a professional dungeon master? I mean, it's such a leap. I mean, what was your thinking behind that decision?
I was looking into going back to school around the time that I started this job. I was not enjoying what I was doing, and I wanted to go back to school for IT work, actually. And it was a fairly easy decision, honestly. It was the choice of, I can go back to school whenever I want, and school's always going to be there. But this opportunity that I've created for myself, if I don't take it, it'll probably leave. It'll probably vanish if I go back to classes and I don't have the time to really maintain games anymore. So, I mean, it wasn't a huge leap for me. The biggest leap was really just that I didn't want to necessarily waste my time doing something that would not wind up being worth it in the long run.
Yeah.
But I guess getting down to like the really gut response behind why is I like helping people have fun and enjoy themselves. It's that simple. I enjoy telling stories and I enjoy making people laugh, and I get to do that with D&D. So.
Okay. Now, typically, who is it that is in your games? As far as age, gender, all that. What's kind of what's the range on that?
Yeah, it was funny when we started out. It was fairly, I think, typical to the D&D community, and it was mostly a lot of middle-aged, like 20s and up, white men. But then we started to expand into the public sphere and started to run more events. And especially as I started to run events in Vancouver, near where I live, Vancouver, Canada, our audience and our player base diversified a lot. So I'd say now at this point, I think we're probably pretty close to a 50-50 split. And we have players from, at this point, all across North America and starting to get into Europe as well. And we try to be as inclusive as possible, right? We try to bring as many different people into the game as possible.
And that actually feeds right into my next question, which is, what are some of the things you do to actively make it inclusive? Because, we don't want to be just passively inclusive, just say, oh, we're inclusive. What do you do actively to, make sure that, everybody's represented or as many people have the opportunity as possible to play?
Well, part of that is we have a really strong code of conduct to make sure that, nobody is discriminated against. And if there's the hint of that we discuss it with the player. And, if they persist, then they get the boot. We don't mess around with letting people stay in the community if they're going to make people feel uncomfortable or insult or hurt others, right? That doesn't lead to a good community, and it doesn't lead to good D&D. So we pursue that quite strongly. We also make sure that we try to have DMs that match those different types of players. Now, I'm going to be honest, that one's a harder one. D&D being such a hobby that was previously so cis-het white male, that's a little bit harder to hit. And we're still getting to the point now where we're trying to bring, more DMs on from more diverse backgrounds. But it is a continuing goal, and it is something that we're continuing to pursue. We also make our opinions on the admin team and the DM side as strongly clear as possible to all players when they join. We have no problem weighing in on things like BLM. Like we made a statement when that came out and talked about how we wanted to do whatever we could to support our local chapter of BLM. We talked about wanting to make sure that nobody felt at the table like they were being targeted unfairly for anything. And when it comes to a story perspective, we just don't include certain things in our games. It's a fantasy world, and I know that there's going to be DMs who really think that slavery is an important storytelling tool for some reason. I don't think that slavery is an important storytelling tool, and I don't think that a lot of acts of violence in any type, emotional, physical, mental, whatever, are necessary to include. So we try our best to make sure that nothing like that gets to the table, and that we stick to topics that are more comfortable, not easy necessarily, but not something that is going to trigger anybody, to the best of our ability.
What are some of the typical things, hot button things? I mean, besides the slavery, which is pretty obvious, what are some of the other things that you try and avoid at the game?
Sure. We don't do any sexual violence at the table. We don't do any sexual content, period, really, at our tables. Right. Given that they're all drop-in events and that they're open to youths from 14 and up, like we don't want to include any of that kind of content.
Right.
It's just not something we need to do. And if people really want romantic or sexual content in their games, well, we offer private drop-in game or private contract games as well, where we are a little bit more welcoming of all of those sorts of things because we can talk individually to the players ahead of time and figure out what are the restrictions, what are your limits, and what don't you want to do. We also use the X card system. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, that's the we in the military we call it the. Well, I'm not going to say what we call it in the military, but I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. X card, lines and veils, all of those different systems.
Stress card was the official name. Was a stress card. But yeah. So go ahead and explain how that works to our audience.
Of course, yeah. So the X card system or lines and veils, either one of those is excellent from a storytelling perspective to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and safe. The X card is really straightforward. All that it is in physical space, it's just a card with an X on it that you leave in the table. And if somebody is uncomfortable with a scene for whatever reason, then all they have to do is put their hand on that card, and the DM is responsible for finding a way to move the story forwards without including that content. So I've seen it used in cases where there was the potential for violence to animals, or there was the potential for emotional trauma involving children, all sorts of things that some DMs might have included in the story, and players might go, no, I can't deal with it. So all you have to do is press the card, and the DM basically skips forward and will either summarize it or cut it out of the story or find some way to make sure that it's not going to trigger you. Lines and veils is something that's a little bit harder for us to do, but we still occasionally do it, and I definitely do it in my home games. It's basically just lines that you will not cross, things that you won't do in your games, period, and situations where you will fade to black, veils. So, one thing that's common in D&D games that I try to de-emphasize as a method because I don't think it works is some parties will try to torture enemies to get information out of them. I am firmly of the belief that torture is not a particularly good information gathering method, that it doesn't work very well, but it's a staple of a lot of fantasy stories, and some parties really want it included in their worlds. And in those cases, my personal policy is I always fade to black. I will not tell that story. It is not something I'm comfortable telling. And yeah, usually it'll just be a case of roll for intimidation, and then we can talk about it after the fact.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. Do you do any kind of survey or anything like that before the game, like a pregame survey where you want to find out where those lines and X's are at?
When it comes to my private events, I absolutely do. When it comes to my public events, simply because of the number of players that we have, that's not a possibility. We have a pretty large community, and we try to make it as safe as possible for people. But we don't do pregame surveys for drop-in groups, no. Okay.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break, and then when we pick up, we're going to talk a little bit more about your professional side, more on the professional and what you're doing in corporate North America, which includes Canada. But it's great. So let's go ahead and take a quick break, and then we will pick this right back up. Okay, we're back. Just for those of you who might just be just starting to join on, we have Craig Chapman on with us, and he is a professional gamer, professional dungeon master, who also works in the corporate world doing team building with Dungeons and Dragons. We had a late comment just come in, I just noticed, and which is from Chanel. Sexual conduct doesn't need to be part of the game. I do love a good wedding, though, or love a wedding, though. And my personal experience has been I don't like doing sexual scenes either because they just get damn uncomfortable and creepy when it's just you and a bunch of guys around. I mean, trying to pick up on the barmaid, and I'm like, dude, you do realize that I am the barmaid that you're playing with, So
yeah, there's something distinctly strange about my job in that category, Chanel. I, as part of DMing, I do tell romantic stories sometimes. People enjoy romance in their games. They enjoy relationships. They enjoy those character connections. The weirdest thing that I have to do as a professional dungeon master is flirt with somebody while their partner is sitting a seat down. And just sit there and be like, this is my character. I'm like, please make sure you know this is my character. This is not me. I am not flirting with your partner. This is just me. And romance is an integral part of D&D, and those connections are there. I have no problem doing it, but it is probably like the strangest part of my job that I didn't expect getting into it. I just didn't think about it.
What are some of the kind of typical romance stories that you have done?
A lot of the time, it's a story that builds up over the course of a campaign, right? It's characters meet some sort of NPC, and they, for whatever reason, find a connection with an NPC. I had a lot of times people seem to really enjoy bonding with characters that are a regular part of the campaign. So one of my campaigns right now, the party has an airship, and they started off on somebody else's airship, and the romance is between the captain of that first airship and one of the current players. And that's been a fun one to navigate because it's sort of been a ships crossing at sea sort of situation where, like, very often they'll wind up passing each other in the skies without the chance to actually stop by and say anything. And then, in port, they wind up in these whirlwind romance situations. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay. Now, do you design an NPC for a romantic encounter, or do you,
no,
or do they just kind of latch on to, oh, I wasn't expecting that?
Yeah. I don't design NPCs with the intention of them becoming romantic targets of interest. But I can tell you that certain types of NPCs are more likely to become targets of those opinions and feelings. If I design some debonair, suave, fast-talking, like James Bond character, then that's going to appeal to a certain type of player as somebody that they think their character would be into. You could design the big, broad, burly character, and whatever their gender, that type of like just dumb but really heartfelt and loving character also appeals to a certain type of player. So it teaches you a lot about your players, based on who they go after as their romantic targets.
Okay. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your professional career. Now, your company does, among other things, corporate team building. Can you go a little bit into that? How Dungeons & Dragons plays into this?
Yeah, happily. There's a lot less romance. So, with corporate team building events, it's generally speaking, we have some specific adventures that we've built for that purpose. And the goal of those adventures is to train and teach people to work together and to understand how their coworkers and their peers think, right? And that's the goal of it. That's not what we tell people, but that's the goal of it. The on the surface goal is have fun solving this puzzle, right? Have fun dealing with this adventure. But we try to set it up in such a way that we have people who can only solve specific problems. And so everybody needs to work together to resolve a particular plot problem in an adventure. And it leads to people really starting to understand in different ways how their peers approach problems, how they communicate, what their how they think about things, right? Are they somebody that's more direct, or are they going to sit back and think about a problem for 5 minutes and then come up with this really incredible out of the box solution? It's just a really good way to sort of subtly teach people how to handle certain problems and how to work together in different ways.
What's a typical problem that you introduce to these players?
We have to keep them pretty simple because with team building exercises, it's usually a one-off activity. It's not usually something that's a recurring multiple adventure campaign. So they tend to be a bit more straightforward with one or two twists. So we've done one that was, like figure out who in town is the werewolf, right? Like like sort of traditional mafia werewolf style gameplay. Go hunting through town and find which townsperson is the werewolf in order to save the town from their machinations and their hunger. And the way you resolve that is always going to be different group to group. Some groups might find that person and decide, oh no, you're going to get the silver bullet, right? You're done. Other groups might look at that and go, oh, well, it's not their fault that they were cursed by this. Can we break the curse? We've done that. We've done finding one of the king's knights who was lost in the field on some quest for the king. We've done more simple, straightforward things like hunt down and defeat this particular monster, but you're going to have to figure out what the monster's weaknesses are in advance. They tend to be simpler plots where we allow the players to dictate a lot of the flow of the game because we don't know going into the game how into D&D everybody is going to be. So if it's something really esoteric and something that relies on knowledge of D&D, it's less successful.
So typically on these events, how long does this one shot last? Are you shooting for as far as time wise?
Anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. It's entirely dependent on the client. I can tell a decent story in 2 hours. I find that having 4 hours is much better. That's really like a good amount of time for a short story to resolve. But I can do a 2-hour campaign or 2-hour adventure rather without any difficulty. It's just I have to constrain the story that I'm telling.
Now, are most of these players brand new players that are coming in on these corporate events?
It entirely varies. A lot of the time what happens is 1 or 2 people on the team know about D&D and are really excited about the prospect of playing D&D at the table. And so they will often sort of lead the charge for it and have their ideas of how to do things. And it's fun, too, because it's not always the really outgoing, charismatic people who are playing these characters. It's oftentimes the people who are a bit, quieter, who might not necessarily engage as much in dialogue at the office, and they get their chance to shine. And other people have to see, like, oh, this person is really cool. Like, I like the way they think. I like the way they solve problems.
Yeah.
It varies. A lot of the time there are a bunch of people who have never played D&D before, who have only heard of it because of Stranger Things, or something like that.
Yeah.
But they it's fun to run D&D for both of those groups at the same time.
Okay. Now, here's a big question. Why corporate? I mean, you've already got, your base going on, and then you stretch out into this. Why did you do this?
It pays a lot better.
I bet.
It pays a lot better. But honestly, it's not just that it pays a lot better. It's that I can use the fact that it pays a lot better to subsidize the rest of my business. So I don't necessarily look at the rest of my business as being something that makes me a ton of money. My drop-in events, I try to keep price reasonable so that as many people as possible can afford to attend them. Because my goal with the company is to get as many people playing D&D as possible. So if I price people out of that, well, I've failed in my number one goal. But with these corporate events, I can charge more because I know that companies can afford to pay more. And I will use the revenue that I make from these events to help pay for other parts of my business, training new employees, creating additional content that's not part of regular adventures, all sorts of stuff like that.
Okay. Now, how many DMs do you have working under you right now?
8 DMs at the moment, with another 4 in the hiring training process right now.
So what's the training process like? How do you run them through let's back up real quick. First of all, what's the qualifications that you look for in a dungeon master that you want to have with you?
The most important thing to me for a dungeon master is, are they a performer? I don't necessarily mean, are they an actor? I can hire somebody who's a performer but not an actor. I need somebody who is comfortable talking to others, somebody who enjoys telling stories and doesn't mind sounding like a bit of a goof at the table, who for whom fun for everybody is one of their most important goals. So if they can make great character voices, and if they are a fantastic storyteller and a great world builder and adventure author, then, all the better. But at the end of the day, what I really look for is, are they a performer? Because I can teach how to DM. I can teach the minutia of 5th edition DMing in the span of maybe 4 or 5 hours for the basics. But I have a heck of a time teaching how to perform and entertain.
Okay. Chanel has a question. So when you DM, do you do different voices for the characters?
I absolutely do. I love character voices, and I used to be awful at it. Every single character of mine for the first, I would say probably 5 years of my DMing sounded like some varying degree of Scottish. But I've gotten better. I've gotten better over the years at different accents and different voices. And you don't even need to do accents, right? You can have 6 characters that are all speaking the same accented language and just change the way they speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as far as when you're changing the way they speak, how do you typically do that? As far as like the pace, the tone?
Pace, tone, intonation, speech patterns. You can make them breathy. You can make them scratchy. You can make them deeper. You can make them higher. You can ending your sentences in different ways, whether you put the emphasis at the beginning of the sentence or the end of it, whether you end your sentence strongly or not. There's so many different ways to make a character sound different without needing to rely on accents.
Okay, yeah, because I suck at accents. I can probably do, and that's about it. But I do like the idea of giving every NPC a different voice. And okay, one of my friends does all orcs in Donald Duck's voice. Oh my god!
Oh, God.
I nearly myself laughing one campaign.
Yeah, I would feel very much the same in that situation. I try to avoid too many like iconic characters when I'm doing accents. I'm not that great at them. I have one DM who is spectacular at accents and like impersonations and impressions, and listening to his games is just a true pleasure. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about what I have with D&DG as well is all of my DMs have their own specialties. All of my DMs are able to tell stories in different ways. So like I was saying before with the performers, one person might be a performer who is also really, really good at world building. One person might be a performer who runs the best dungeons you've ever seen. And another person might be a performer who writes these intricate, intrigue-laden, like mysterious political plots. And the fact that I have all of them working for me means that if a player wants one of those things, I can say, go play in that game, and you'll get the thing that you're looking for.
Okay, great. Now let's go into the training. What does the training look like for these prospective DMs?
It is pretty straightforward, honestly. It really is just a case of teaching them whatever they need to know to run games with D&DG. And in some cases, that's a bit more comprehensive, and it involves going through 5th edition's rules and teaching the mechanics of DMing. In some cases, it involves teaching familiarity with adventure writing, right? Some people might be really good at world building, but not very great at adventure writing. So I need to do a bit of extra work to teach them how to write adventures. It's really a individualized training scheme. I don't have a one-size-fits-all thing because I don't think that one size does fit all in this case.
Right, exactly. So, okay, let's see. Let's go ahead. I want to do one more quick commercial break. Just run a real quick commercial, and then we'll close this up. So let's go ahead and just break for a commercial, and then we'll be right back. Okay. I did have a question I wanted to ask, which was, what's the future looking like for your business? Where are you wanting to go?
Ooh, so many different directions all at the same time. I made the in hindsight now brilliant decision of working with a business consultant about 9 months ago, and he has helped me direct a lot of that just everywhere energy that I had as far as direction. And right now, one of the things that we really want to do is we want to run more large scale events. So one thing that we can do that a lot of other D&D professional DMs can't, and that a lot of other D&D communities can't do, just because it takes a lot of time, is we can put on these really grand scale, 6 DM plus adventures where we have, 5 to 10 tables coming together to resolve a much bigger plot point. And it makes everybody feel like they're part of this really big team, and lets them feel cool and lets them interact with all the other tables and do things that you just can't do in a regular D&D game. We ran one just a few weeks back that was really well received and really enjoyed. We're planning on running another Halloween epic at some point in the next... Actually, I guess it's about a month precisely out now. It's going to be the 23rd of October.
Okay. Sweet. Now, let's see. I had a question right on top of my head. I'm trying to think of it before it disappears. Good stories. Let's talk some stories here. What's probably one of the most memorable things that your players have done to put things off the rails?
To push things off the rails. Let me think on that for a sec. I just run so many different campaigns, and they've all got such awesome stories connected to them. I think one of the biggest ones is one of my campaigns. Actually, it's the 8-person campaign that I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. I try really hard to involve in all my campaigns, but in this one more recently, characters' backgrounds as part of the campaign and as part of the story. And getting the chance to work through a character's background and give them, unexpected shocks and twists and fun in those backgrounds, and seeing how they react to it, it can totally derail the story. Now we have a gnomish barbarian in our campaign who the character was married, and when they were younger, before the campaign started, their wife was abducted and was taken away by a group of foreign raiders, and they lost a lot of what their character had. A lot of the early campaign was them sort of dealing with that and moving forwards. In the middle of the campaign, we got to finally go to the place where that had happened and try and learn the location of the character's wife. Recently, about a couple of months back, 2 or 3 months back, we finally got to the point where they were able to go and rescue this character's wife. But they learned that she'd actually been free for quite some time, and that she had found out this character's dark secret, his family's dark secret, and just didn't want to come back. Wasn't ready to forgive the character for what they had enabled and what they had done. And so this character has decided, after consulting with the wizards that they're working for and the sages of the world, that they are going to go all the way down to hell, as far down as they need to, which is the third layer of hell, to find a tree, a particular tree that allows them to wipe a fact from existence, just to completely take it out of the universe. And so they've got all these stories going on, all these plots going on that they're trying to resolve. But this thing of, I need to go and I need to wipe this fact from the universe, has become the overriding desire for this character, above and beyond almost anything else. And it is infected the rest of the party too, with wanting to support the character and wanting to help him achieve his goals. And it's so awesome to watch characters develop something in game that they want to accomplish, that they want to achieve, and just say, we're going to go do this. This is our story for the next little while. We are going to resolve this problem. I have no problem letting my plot be sort of left by the wayside for a little while if it means getting to resolve some really cool character complications.
Yeah, so do you often integrate the backstory in there, or was this kind of like a special case where you're just kind of experimenting, seeing how it works?
As often as possible. If I get a character backstory, I integrate it. It does rely on characters giving me enough information to work with, on them giving me hooks and things that their character wants to accomplish, or some part of their background that I think might make a really good story. And I don't tell characters necessarily ahead of time what I'm going to include, but often I will, as it becomes clear that their story is winding up more relevant, I'll sit down with them and figure out the details of, who was this character to you? Do you have any more siblings? How did this happen? And figure out the specifics and the minutiae of those circumstances. I think it's well worth it to include character stories in your story because it makes the stakes that much more real.
And also it gives them a sense of personal ownership, too, in the story. I guess the interest, I believe, because it helps, hey, this is now my story, too. It's kind of that ownership. And so they do take on that mantle of, when they feel like they're now included in the story and they're not just a player in it. I do think that it helps a lot.
I agree.
Getting some vested interest in it. I know one of my examples I always like to talk about is I was back in the Army. I was playing in the barracks, Dungeons and Dragons, with a bunch of guys who'd never played Dungeons and Dragons before, except for one player. They get into this town, and nothing, and everything's fine. They hadn't done nothing wrong. Nobody was looking for them. And the guard walks up to introduce himself and tell them where the job board is. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, run. And they go off in 4 different directions running. And I had never done a chase scene before. So I had to run 4 chase scenes in 4 different directions. and these guys were just totally off the rails. And that's when I learned to throw my notes out the window and do by the seat of my pants a lot of these campaigns with minimum notes, is because of that. Because I had this elaborate story built up. I had this adventure hook where they would go into the job board and they'd get a couple different jobs, and then they just totally tanked everything, And another example, not the same party, but a different party, finds a wizard's tower. And the idea was, of course, they got to go from the first floor and work their way up until they get to the big bad, Well, they decide, screw this. They go 3 days out of the way to pick up this fire plant that, when you touch it, causes 3d6 fire damage. And they're using Mage Hand, moving this plant, every couple of feet with Mage Hand, as long as it would last, until they get 3 days back to this wizard's tower. They blow a hole in the side of it, stuff the plant in there, and then cast plant growth on it like a bunch of times. So not only did they kill the wizard without ever seeing him, but they also lost the spell book, lost the idol they were supposed to get, everything else because they made this thing completely uninhabitable. So
that's a really grandiose way to cast Fireball without casting Fireball.
Yeah. But
I love it.
I just love hearing stories about just the fun things people come up with, and let's see. I use my cricket to make the best boards. I cheat. Okay. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe I should look at a previous question. I love the art of building a character and drawing the campaign. Yeah. And it is very much an art form. There are some science to it, as far as, you want these particular elements in a story, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, or beginning, middle, and end. So there's certain elements in it, but it very much is an art form in developing a campaign. And what kind of campaign style do you typically run as far as what your characters run through?
I vary it quite a lot depending on what sort of players I've got. So I make a big deal out of running session 0 and making sure that I know what my players are looking for before the campaign even starts, because I find that I get the best campaigns out of players knowing what the expectations are going to be and agreeing with those expectations. My personal preference, though, is I really enjoy running underdog stories, and I really enjoy running, more dramatic, serious content. I try to put humor into my games and comedy into my games, and I succeed at it reasonably often, but it's not my strength. I find I really enjoy telling those epic, sprawling, high fantasy stories as often as possible.
Okay. Chanel says a cricket is a machine that cuts out things. It's a cutting machine. Okay. So
yeah. I'm familiar with one of those.
Cricket. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That makes more sense. Okay. We're going to go ahead and tie this up. I had a great interview. Is there if there's a way anybody wants to get a hold of you, want to play with you, or anything like that, how do people find you?
We can be found at dndg.ca. That's our website, and that's got links to all of our socials on there. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. We also run a regular campaign Wednesday nights, Wednesday at 5:30 PST, 8:30 EST on twitch.tv/Dungeons and Do-Gooders, and that just started its third season this past week. So it's a good time to jump in. It's a bit more episodic, like sort of TV style content. So we've done 2 previous seasons, but you don't need to have watched them to enjoy this most recent one. And most of our stuff takes place, if not on Twitch, on Discord, which you can find a link to on our website.
Okay, excellent. And let me go over here to banners, create a banner. Let me type that in again. What was the web address?
dndg.ca.
Okay, I got autocorrect trying to tell me how to spell it. All right, let's do that one more time.
Yeah. It is dndg.ca.
Okay. dndg.ca. Okay, let's see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
all right. So that is where if you have any got it. Yes. So if anybody wants to get a hold of Craig, want to find out more information about Dungeons and Do-Gooders and what they're doing, go ahead and check out his website down below right there. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and put you in the back real quick. We'll tie up the conversation after we finish broadcasting. But thank you so much for coming on. Really enjoyed having you.
It was my pleasure. I always love talking to you.
We learned a lot, too, so that's great. So thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, audience, for checking us out. Really enjoyed this particular interview. It was great. Be sure to watch us live on Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, here where you're watching this, or go to WLFE-DB.com for more information about where you can find us. We're on Strum TV under the Variety Unlimited channel. We're also on twitch.tv/Bipolar DM if you want to watch previous episodes and also catch some of my other shows that I have going on. You can listen to this show anywhere at any time on the podcast. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Spreaker, we're on iHeart, we're on Google, we're on Amazon. So usually it's about a day or so before I put this up. I might have it up before the end of the night. But if you miss an episode, want to listen to some other ones, tune in to our podcast, what we got going on, which is this show rebroadcasted on the podcast. If you want to reach out to us, you want to be a guest on the show, or you have a question or topic suggestion, my email is thebipolardm@gmail.com, or go to my webpage, thebipolardm.com. There you'll find previous episodes of my podcast, my live shows, as well as the links to all other things that I got going on, different resources. Next week's show, we are going to have Jason Eastman back. Yes, looking forward to that. Professional Dungeon Master Jason Eastman. So we're going to have him on next week. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Bipolar DM Show. And remember, everybody, take your meds.
Oh, yeah. Life just got sweeter now that WLFE-DB has merchandise. Show your support by purchasing your t-shirts for WLFE, Paratalk Radio, Inside the Drag Closet, and more. But it doesn't stop there. T-shirts, coffee mugs, tanks, buttons, cloth bags, and more. Go to WLFE-DB.com. On the top bar, click on the merchandise tab and bam! There you go. You got merch. Support the shows. WLFE-DB.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bipolar DM. They love sharing thoughts and ideas. See you next week, 7 p.m. Saturdays on WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows, and that makes for great talk radio. WLFE Digital Broadcast Network is on TV. You can watch all of our shows on WLFE-DB.com. Check out our channels. Paranormal View for all of your paranormal type shows. LGBTQ Friends for all of our LGBTQ shows. Variety Unlimited for all other shows. It runs 24/7 right on WLFE-DB.com. You'll even catch the lives, all in one place. Never miss an episode, past or future. WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows.